The misty morning air hung heavy over Pine Ridge Forest as Rebecca pulled her worn Ford to the side of the winding country road. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, and for a moment she couldn't bring herself to turn off the engine. In the back seat, wrapped in the only soft blankets she owned, her twin babies slept, peacefully unaware that their world was about to change forever. Have you ever faced a moment so desperate, so impossible, that you considered doing something you never thought you could? A moment where love and desperation collided in the most heartbreaking way. Rebecca Martinez had reached that moment. At 26, with long brown hair that hadn't seen a proper salon in months, and wearing a simple lavender dress that had been her Sunday best, she sat in her car, knowing she was about to make a decision that would haunt her forever. The twins, Michael and Maria, were just 3 weeks old, born premature. They had spent their first weeks in the hospital, accumulating medical bills that Rebecca could never hope to pay. Her husband had left when the pregnancy became complicated, disappearing with their savings and leaving her with nothing but debt and 2 tiny lives depending on her. "I'm so sorry, my sweet babies," she whispered, her voice breaking as she looked back at them. "Mama loves you more than anything in this world. That's why ... That's why I have to do this." The plan was simple, if you could call it that. She would place them safely by the roadside, where anyone would find them quickly. Someone who could give them what she couldn't, a future. Then she would drive away and never look back, carrying the weight of this moment for the rest of her life. Rebecca stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady. The forest around her was quiet, except for the gentle whisper of wind through the pine trees. She had chosen this spot because it was on the route to the nearby town, where commuters would pass by regularly. Someone would find them soon. Someone had to. She carefully lifted Michael first, then Maria, laying them side by side on the soft grass just off the road. They were wrapped in yellow blankets, not because she didn't know their genders, but because yellow was hopeful, sunny, innocent, everything she wanted their lives to be. "Please forgive me," she whispered, kissing each tiny forehead. "When you're older, I hope you'll understand that sometimes love means making the hardest choice of all." What Rebecca didn't know was that she wasn't alone. 300 yards down the road, pulled into a small clearing, David Harrison sat in his black Subaru, talking on his phone to his assistant about the morning's board meeting. At 42, David was the CEO of Harrison Industries, a successful manufacturing company he had built from nothing. With his dark hair just beginning to show gray at the temples, and wearing his usual combination of jeans and a brown leather jacket, he looked more like a outdoorsman than a corporate executive. David had always preferred the back roads for his morning drives to the office. They reminded him of growing up in rural Virginia, of simpler times when life made more sense. His success had come at a cost: long hours, missed family dinners, a divorce that still stung 3 years later. These quiet drives were his moment of peace before the chaos of corporate life began. He was about to hang up his call when he noticed a woman by the old Ford. Something about her posture, the way she was kneeling on the ground, made him pause. David had learned to trust his instincts in business, and right now, every instinct was telling him something was wrong. "Linda, I'll call you back," he said, ending the call and stepping out of his car. From his vantage point, partially hidden by the trees, David watched as Rebecca knelt beside what looked like bundles on the ground. It took a moment for his mind to process what he was seeing. When he realized those weren't bundles, but babies, his heart nearly stopped. He watched, transfixed and horrified, as Rebecca stood up, wiped her eyes, and began walking back toward her car. The babies remained on the ground, alone and vulnerable, in the cool morning air. David's first instinct was to call out, to run toward her, to demand an explanation. But something in the woman's posture, the way her shoulders shook, the deliberate slowness of her steps, told him this wasn't a moment for confrontation. This was a moment for understanding. Instead, he waited. He watched as Rebecca stood by her car for what felt like an eternity, her hand on the door handle, looking back at the babies again and again. He could see her internal struggle from 50 yards away, and it broke his heart. Finally, she got in her car and drove away, leaving 2 tiny lives beside the road. David didn't hesitate. The moment her taillights disappeared around the bend, he was running. His expensive leather shoes slipped on the wet grass as he reached the babies, dropping to his knees beside them. Michael and Maria were awake now, their tiny faces pink and healthy despite the cool morning air. They looked up at David with the unfocused gaze of newborns, completely trusting, completely innocent. "Hey there, little ones," David whispered, his voice gentle despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "You're safe now. I've got you." He carefully gathered them in his arms, feeling their warmth against his chest. In that moment, something shifted inside David Harrison. These weren't just abandoned babies, they were 2 human beings who needed him, who had somehow been placed in his path for a reason he couldn't yet understand. David's phone rang. It was his assistant again, wondering where he was, reminding him of the important meeting. For the first time in his career, David Harrison ignored a business call. Instead, he called 911. "I need to report to abandoned infants," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "They appear healthy, but they need immediate medical attention. I'm on Pine Ridge Road, about 2 miles from the highway junction." While waiting for the ambulance, David sat in his car with the babies, keeping them warm and talking to them softly. He found himself telling them about his own childhood, about the foster family who had taken him in when he was 12 after his parents died in a car accident. "You know, little ones, sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to the best ones. I learned that when I was about your age, well, not quite your age, but young enough to be scared and alone." The ambulance arrived within minutes, followed by a police car and a social services van. As the paramedics checked the babies, confirming they were healthy and unharmed, David found himself in conversation with Sarah Chen, the social worker who had responded to the call. "You did the right thing, Mr. Harrison," Sarah said, her voice kind but professional. "These babies are lucky you found them when you did. What happens to them now?" David asked, unable to take his eyes off the twins as they were loaded into the ambulance. "They'll be placed in emergency foster care while we investigate. If no family comes forward, they'll be put up for adoption." David felt something twist in his chest. How long does that process usually take? It varies. Could be months, could be longer. "Why, do you ask?" The question hung in the air between them. David wasn't sure he was ready to answer it, wasn't sure he understood the answer himself. But as he watched the ambulance drive away with Michael and Maria, he knew his life had just changed in ways he couldn't have imagined when he woke up that morning. "I'd like to know how they're doing," he said finally. "Maybe I could visit them." Sarah Chen had seen a lot in her 15 years as a social worker, but something in David's expression caught her attention. "Mr. Harrison, are you thinking about what I think you're thinking about?" David was quiet for a long moment, watching the empty road where the ambulance had disappeared. "I'm thinking about 2 babies who need a family, and a man who's been wondering what his life is really for." 3 days later, David sat in the social services office, filling out paperwork that would begin the process of becoming a foster parent. It was a decision that had shocked everyone who knew him, his assistant, his board of directors, his ex-wife. But it was also a decision that felt more right than anything David had done in years. "I have to ask, Mr. Harrison," Sarah said during their interview, "this is a significant life change. Are you sure you're ready for this?" David thought about the question seriously. "Miss Chen, I've spent the last 20 years building a company, accumulating wealth, achieving what most people would call success. But when I held those babies in my arms, I realized I'd never felt more useful, more needed, more." He paused, looking out the window at the playground, where children were laughing and playing. "I grew up in foster care myself. I know what it's like to wonder if anyone will ever choose you, if anyone will ever fight for you. Those babies chose me, in a way. They came into my life when I needed them as much as they needed me." The foster care approval process moved more quickly than usual, thanks to David's resources and his immediate and obvious commitment to the children. Within 2 weeks, he was bringing Michael and Maria home to his house in the suburbs, a house that had felt too big and too empty for years. David's housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, a grandmother of 6, helped him prepare for the baby's arrival. She taught him about feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the importance of reading to children even when they're too young to understand the words. "Mr. David," she said one evening as she watched him carefully burp Maria while Michael slept in his arms, "you are a natural at this. These babies, they know they are loved." "I can't believe how much my life has changed," David replied, his voice full of wonder. "3 weeks ago, I thought success meant quarterly profits and market share. Now success means these two sleeping through the night." As the weeks turned into months, David found himself becoming the father he never thought he could be. He learned to function on little sleep, to prioritize feeding schedules over business meetings, to find joy in the smallest milestones, a first smile, a tiny hand grasping his finger, the peaceful sound of 2 babies breathing in their cribs. The adoption process moved forward steadily. David's lawyers handled the legal complexities, while David focused on something more important, being present for every moment of Michael and Maria's early lives. One evening, as he sat in the nursery reading to the twins, David's phone rang. It was Sarah Chen from Social Services. "Mr. Harrison, I have some news. We've been trying to locate the children's biological mother to ensure all legal requirements are met for the adoption." David's heart skipped. "Did you find her?" "We did. Her name is Rebecca Martinez. She's been living in a shelter downtown, and, well, she asked if she could meet you." The meeting was arranged for the following week at the social services office. David arrived early, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first board presentation years ago. He wasn't sure what to expect, what to say, how to handle the complex emotions of meeting the woman who had made his newfound happiness possible. Rebecca looked different than she had that morning by the road. Her hair was clean and pulled back neatly, and she wore a simple blue dress that looked new. But her eyes held the same pain David had sensed that morning in the forest. "Mr. Harrison," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you for finding them, for taking care of them." David studied her face, seeing not the woman who had abandoned her children, but a young mother who had made an impossible choice. "Rebecca, I want you to know that Michael and Maria are healthy and happy. They're beautiful children." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I think about them every day. I know what I did was. I know how it looked, but I want you to understand, I didn't abandon them. I chose them. I chose their future over my own heart." "Tell me about that morning," David said gently. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I had nothing. No money, no family, no way to feed them or get them the medical care they needed. I was living in my car, and winter was coming. I thought if I left them where someone good would find them, someone who could give them everything I couldn't, it would be the most loving thing I could do." She wiped her eyes. "I never imagined someone like you would find them, someone who would love them the way I could see you do, just from what Ms. Chen has told me." David felt his throat tighten. "Rebecca, I need you to know something. I grew up in foster care. I know what it's like to wonder about the people who gave you life. When Michael and Maria are old enough, I want them to know about you. I want them to understand that you loved them enough to make sure they had a chance. Would you tell them that I never stopped loving them? That not a day goes by that I don't wonder what they're doing, if they're happy." "I'll tell them," David promised. "And Rebecca, I want you to know that if you ever get back on your feet, if you ever want to be part of their lives in some way, I'm open to that conversation. These children have enough love in their lives for everyone who cares about them." 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. David Harrison officially became the father of Michael David Harrison and Maria Elena Harrison. Rebecca, who had found a job in a small apartment with help from social services, sent a card congratulating David and thanking him for giving her children the life she had dreamed of for them. As David sat in his home office that evening, with the cribs nearby and the soft sound of babies sleeping, he reflected on how profoundly his life had changed. The man who had once measured success in dollars and deals now measured it in smiles and milestones. His company was thriving under the management structure he had put in place to accommodate his new priorities. His employees respected him more, not less, for his dedication to his children. And for the first time in years, David felt like he was living a life that mattered. That night, as he gave Michael and Maria their evening bottles, David told them the story of how they came into his life. He told them about the misty morning in the forest, about their first mother's impossible choice, and about the day he realized that sometimes the most important business decisions have nothing to do with business at all. "You two taught me something important," he whispered as they drifted off to sleep. "Success isn't about what you accumulate. It's about what you give, what you nurture, what you choose to fight for." Outside, the same pine trees that had witnessed Rebecca's heartbreak and David's discovery swayed gently in the evening breeze, keeping their quiet vigil over a story of love, loss, and the miraculous ways that broken hearts can become whole again. Sometimes, the most important moments in our lives happen when we're not looking for them. Sometimes, the greatest success comes from simply being present when someone needs us most. And sometimes, the family we've always wanted finds us in the most unexpected ways.